I had been with Sophie for 8 years. But for the past few months, I knew something was wrong. She had become distant, coming home late, whispering on phone calls, hiding her messages as if I were a stranger, not her husband. I wasn't naive. I had my suspicions. And today they were confirmed. She stood before me confident, smug, and completely unbothered. With a smirk, she tossed a stack of divorce papers onto the table. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the wood as she spoke, her voice dripping with amusement. "I've been with an incredible man for 8 months now," she said. "He's better than you in every way." My jaw tightened. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. Then, she leaned in closer and added, "And if you even think about touching him, I'll have you locked up." That was the moment I stopped feeling. No pain, no anger, no heartbreak, just calm. Because what she didn't know was that my revenge was already in motion. Sophie thought she had won. She believed she had stripped me of my dignity, backed me into a corner where I would beg or crumble. She had no idea that I had seen this coming for weeks. While she was sneaking around enjoying her little affair, I was preparing. Quietly, carefully. The house. In my name. Her luxury car. Under my lease. Our shared bank accounts. I had already moved most of the money into my private account. Now, as she stood there, basking in her so-called victory, she had no clue that her entire life was about to collapse. I picked up the divorce papers and casually flipped through them, as if they were just another work document. Then I looked up and smiled. "You want a divorce?" I asked, my voice calm. "Fine." She blinked, confused. She had expected me to yell, beg, or argue. Instead, I gave her nothing. I leaned back and chuckled. "Get your things," I said, amused. "Because you won't be staying here." Her smirk faltered. "What?" I gestured around. "This house. Mine. Your car. Mine. Your comfortable little life." I let out a slow chuckle. "Gone." For the first time, she looked uncertain. Then she recovered quickly. "I'll just move in with him." I smiled. "Oh, you mean Damien?" Her face went pale. "Bullseye. How do you know his name?" she whispered. I chuckled. "Oh, Sophie, did you really think you could cheat for 8 months, and I wouldn't find out?" She stiffened. I raised a hand, cutting her off before she could speak. "Let me tell you a story," I said smoothly. "A man finds out his wife is cheating. He doesn't react. Instead, he investigates. And what does he discover?" I let the words hang, watching her squirm. Then I continued. "He finds out that her incredible lover isn't the successful businessman she thinks he is. He's drowning in debt, living in a rented apartment paid for by his rich older brother. He has 3 failed businesses. And, worst of all, he owes money to some very dangerous people." Sophie's breathing became shaky. "You're lying." I slid my phone across the table. "Am I?" With trembling hands, she picked it up. Her eyes widened as she stared at the screen. Proof of Damien's debt, failed businesses, and legal documents showing just how deep he was in trouble. When she finally looked up at me, she was speechless. "Still think he's better than me in every way?" I asked with a smirk. I arched a brow. Her hands trembled, but I simply stood up unfazed. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "You'll have plenty of time to figure things out." I gestured toward the door. "Since you know you won't be staying here." At first she refused to leave. "You can't kick me out," she hissed. I laughed. "Oh, Sophie, I already did." That's when she noticed. The color drained from her face as reality set in. Her credit cards declined. Her bank account drained. Her belongings, already packed in a suitcase by the door. "You," she choked on her words. "You took everything." I smiled. "No, sweetheart. You threw everything away." She stood there frozen, completely and utterly powerless. Then, in a final act of desperation, she did something pathetic. She grabbed her phone and dialed Damien. I watched amused as her face crumbled. Straight to voicemail. I let out a soft chuckle. "Oh right. I forgot to mention Damien. He's in trouble." Sophie's head snapped up. "What?" I sighed dramatically. "Seems he borrowed money from the wrong people. And when certain photos of him with you made their way to his debt collectors." I trailed off, watching the panic rise in her eyes. Her lips trembled. "What did you do?" I smirked. "I simply accelerated the inevitable." The reality hit her all at once. Damien was gone. She had nowhere to go. Nothing left. She turned back to me, her eyes desperate. Nathan, I held up a hand, stopping her. Don't bother. A long silence. Then finally she broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I made a mistake, she whispered. I stared at her unmoved. Yes, I said simply. You did. She took a shaky step forward. Please, Nathan, just one more chance. I looked her dead in the eyes and delivered the final blow. I wouldn't take you back if you were the last woman on earth. She let out a choked sob. And I turned away. Sophie stood in the doorway, frozen, her world crumbling around her. Just hours ago, she had smirked with confidence, believing she had won, thinking she had me wrapped around her finger. Now she was a wreck. Her hands trembled as she clutched the divorce papers. The same papers she had tossed onto the table with arrogance, believing she was in control. But control had slipped from her grasp. Please, Nathan, she choked out. I have nowhere to go. I leaned against the counter, sipping my drink slowly, letting her suffer. You should have thought about that, I said calmly, before you threw away your life for a man who's currently running for his. She flinched. What do you mean? I chuckled, shaking my head. Oh, Sophie, did you really think Damien could just walk away from his debts? That his business partners wouldn't notice he's been living large on borrowed money? Her face paled. Where is he? I checked my watch. Probably halfway to nowhere by now. I smirked. But those people he owes, they don't forget. Sophie stumbled back, gripping the doorframe like her knees were about to give out. But you said. I said I accelerated the inevitable. I tilted my head, watching the panic unfold in her eyes. What do you think happens when a desperate man with a gambling problem suddenly gets exposed? Tears streamed down her face. Oh my God. I shrugged. Actions have consequences, sweetheart. You just didn't expect to face yours. She collapsed onto the couch, completely broken. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, the news broke. Local businessman Damien Clark disappears amid financial scandal. Authorities investigate possible connections to organized crime. I smirked as I read the headline, sipping my coffee. Perfect. Damien had skipped town, knowing full well what was coming for him. His debts, his fraudulent deals, his dangerous connections, all exposed. I had made sure of it. And Sophie, she had spent the entire night calling him, texting him, begging. But there was no answer. She was alone. That's when she tried to crawl back to me. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, tears streaking down her face, her makeup ruined. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had tossed divorce papers in my face. Nathan, she whispered, her voice trembling. Can we talk? I set my coffee down, meeting her desperate gaze. Talk about what? She wiped at her face, inhaling shakily. Us. I raised an eyebrow. There is no us. Her breath hitched. Please, I know I messed up, but I don't want to lose you. I stared at her for a long moment, then I laughed. A deep, cruel laugh. You don't want to lose me? I repeated. Sophie, you threw me away for him. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. You humiliated me, I continued, my voice sharp as a knife. You looked me in the eye and said he was better than me in every way. I leaned in, my tone cutting. How's that working out for you? She flinched. I was stupid. I leaned back, smirking. Yes, you were. Tears welled in her eyes again. Nathan, I love you. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. No. You loved the life I gave you. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I wouldn't take you back if you were the last woman on earth. Her face crumpled. Her last hope shattered. She sobbed. What am I supposed to do? I stood up, picking up my coffee, completely unmoved. You'll figure it out. Then I walked away. Sophie left that morning with nowhere to go. With Damien gone, she had no one to turn to. She tried calling her friends, but no one wanted to associate with the woman who had lost everything. And me? I was better than ever. Weeks passed and I finalized the divorce on my terms. Sophie walked away with nothing. Her glamorous life gone, her perfect future with Damien destroyed, and her reputation in ruins. One afternoon, as I enjoyed a quiet drink at a high-end bar, I saw her sister Claire. She slid into the seat across from me, studying me carefully. You really did it, she said softly. I took a sip. Did what? She smirked. You took them both down. I shrugged. I just let karma do its job. She chuckled, stirring her drink. You don't regret anything? I smirked. Not a damn thing. She leaned back, shaking her head. You know, Sophie's been calling me nonstop, begging for help. I raised a brow. And, Claire smiled. Not my problem. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling lighter than I had in years. Some betrayals break you, but if you're smart, they make you stronger. And I had never been stronger. Months later, I sat in my penthouse, watching the London skyline, reflecting on everything I had lost, a wife, a friend. But I had gained something far more valuable. Freedom. I had walked away without looking back, and Sophie? Last I heard, she was living in a cheap apartment, struggling to find a job. The woman who once had everything was now nothing. All because she made the mistake of thinking I was weak. She underestimated me. But I never lose. As I took another sip of my drink, I smirked. Revenge wasn't just about payback. It was about making sure they never recovered.